Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Esther and I am the survivor advocate here at UNT. In the last training I did, I was able to meet everyone, but we have, it looks like 160 people and climbing right now, so I'm not going to be able to meet everyone, but I'm so happy you're here. I have been the survivor advocate at UNT since October of 2018, so I'm going into my third fall. But a while before that, I was an RA on campus. I was in Kerr for 3 years. And so it feels like coming home every time I get to do a training with you guys. So I'm happy you're here. I know it's a weird fall, but we are making it happen. So I'm going to take just a little bit of your time today to talk about Title IX, survivor advocacy, what I do, what we will be doing together, and then I would love to answer your questions as you have them about situations that you guys may encounter, questions or concerns you have about how to direct a student or encourage or support them. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how to write the best referrals for us so that we can maximize the information that you submit to us without it getting kind of muddy in the referrals that you submit. So we'll just dive right in, and any of the questions that you have, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Sarah is going to be moderating that so that we can make sure that we get those questions answered and see if there are any trends in the things that you guys have going on. So Title IX, we're just going to dive right in. Title IX is probably something you guys have been hearing quite a bit about in the news lately as far as the updates to it. But a really brief crash course to Title IX is that it was a federal law that was enacted back in the early 70s designed to prohibit and prevent, discrimination, like sex-based discrimination on federally funded campuses. And so a lot of the time people think about it in relation to sports as far as gender equality and being able to compete in like sports, but that is not all that it covers. And so really what we're talking about is any kind of discrimination based on sex that occurs at a federally funded institution. And so in addition to athletics, we might also see this kind of discrimination occur in the classroom. And so one of the examples that's on the slide is that in STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, and math, we'll see those largely present in, like, we'll say male-dominated fields. And so when we have an abundance of men in a field, and then you've got women who are in that same field, they may not always feel like they've got the same access to be able to excel or succeed in those fields. And so if that's something that happens, which it definitely does, I can say that for sure in the time that I've worked here, then when we come to learn about any kind of discrimination, like let's say in an engineering class, we've got mostly men in the class and we've got a couple of women who are feeling like they can't maybe voice their opinion or ask a question without getting some sort of pushback, or they're just feeling really unequal in the class. And so if that's something that's happening, that can be examples of Title IX discrimination in the educational field. And so in addition to in the classroom, we're also looking at just in general, sexual harassment, any kind of discrimination based on gender, sexual violence, stalking, rape, exhibitionism, all of those things are covered under Title IX. And so really the purpose of Title IX is to be able to step in whenever schools come to learn about those kinds of incidents and prevent them from keeping the student from being successful academically. And so what that can look like is helping students to facilitate class changes. If in the example that I just gave, where someone is having a tough time in their engineering class, that maybe they need to switch classes and go to a more supportive environment. Let's say that there's something that's going on in housing, which is something that we see fairly often, maybe in the situation of stalking, where there are two people who live on campus and maybe they live in the same residence hall. Or if they don't, the person who's doing the stalking knows where the other person lives and knows their floor and their room, then maybe we might help them to facilitate a room change. Let's say that they're in class with the person who is doing the harassing. And so it's creating panic attacks and they're not able to go to class or they're feeling really uncomfortable, then maybe we look at facilitating those class changes. This can also extend to their extracurricular activities and clubs, sometimes on-campus jobs, but really if it's taking place in the context of a federally funded institution, which is where we are at a university, the school has the obligation to make sure that we can clear those obstacles in order for the students to begin moving forward in a way that's more effective and more efficient and supportive to them. And so that's where the survivor advocate comes in. That is the purpose of my role on campus. And so my name and information are there on the screen. You've got my personal email address, and then survivoradvocate@unt.edu is a good place to reach me and my graduate assistant. And then there's one other person who helps out with the survivor advocacy. And so I'm located in the Union up on the 4th floor next door to the Dean of Students office. So I'm in 411. Obviously, we're still working remotely, but if we're on campus and you needed to walk someone over to our office, you can find us over in 411. So when we meet with a student or when we come to learn about an incident like this, the purpose of the survivor advocate is to act as sometimes the very first point of contact for a student who's experienced sexual violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, or any of these Title IX offenses, okay? And so when we meet with students, we can help them discuss their options as far as reporting. Sometimes it's something that happened with another UNT student, and so they would like to talk to the conduct department in order to figure out how to move forward with an investigation. Sometimes there's an incident that happened with someone who's not affiliated with UNT, or maybe it's something that happened in childhood and they needed to make a report to the police or to CPS or something like that. And so we can also help students discuss those kinds of reporting options and help them decide what's the best way to move forward. But then in addition to that, we know that so many of our students have challenges on campus, mainly with classes, after something like this has happened, especially if it involves another UNT student. And so if we've got a student who's missed, let's say 2 or 3 weeks of classes, or they've missed multiple exams or a midterm or homework assignments or something as a result of this incident that's occurred, it can be pretty intimidating to try and have to contact 4 or 5 different instructors to explain to them, like, hey, the reason I haven't been in class or the reason I haven't logged on in the past 2 weeks is because I was raped and I'm really having a hard time coping. That's a really challenging conversation to have, and it creates a great deal of vulnerability for those students. And so one of the things that I do most often is to do some academic advocacy, which is to reach out to instructors so that the student doesn't have the burden of having to disclose all of that information. I introduce myself and my role on campus and then let them know that, hey, the student is working with the survivor advocate and they're going to need some leniency, flexibility, support in this situation. And so I can ask for extended deadlines. I can ask for excused absences. I can ask for just for them to have a little bit more understanding with the student, because whatever's going on with them, the student would normally have a different performance if they weren't also contending with that as an obstacle. And then I had mentioned briefly facilitating room changes in the residence halls. So sometimes that is a room change, sometimes that is moving them to a new hall altogether. Sometimes that means providing them with a safe place to stay temporarily while they're finding longer term accommodations. And so sometimes whenever you guys submit a referral to us about a student, then we might work with you to find them a new place to stay on campus. Normally when we're doing that, I'll reach out to James first, James Fairchild, let him know what's going on, and then he'll help me to facilitate the changes and keep you guys informed as needed. In addition to those things that we had mentioned, we also help with completing crime victims compensation applications, as well as filing for protective orders. And so in my office on campus, I do have the crime victims compensation application as well as the emergency protective order, emergency protective order application. Now, those are not things that UNT processes. The crime victims compensation goes through the Attorney General for the state of Texas, and then the protective order is going to go through Denton County. And so that's something where we would get them connected to the Attorney General for Denton County, and then have them work through those things. But one way or the other, we can help them get started with the process. In addition, there are some times where someone's case escalates to the point of having to go to court and maybe face their offender. And that can be really challenging to do alone, no matter what. And so I've been to court with some of our survivors before, just to be there with them so that that's not something that they have to do on their own. And that's another service that we provide. In addition to that, we'll see that students are just trying to work through what happened. Sometimes they're feeling fearful, sometimes there's mounting anxiety, sometimes there's just the sadness or the confusion or the guilt that comes from feeling like they should have done something more or something differently to prevent being victimized. And so we always make referrals to counseling, both on campus and off campus. And so on campus, we will make referrals to counseling and testing. We also use UNT Well, and then the Counseling and Human Development Center. And then off campus, we'll make referrals to Denton County Friends of the Family. And then if we've got students who are not in Denton County, then we have lists of resources that are for the Metroplex. And if they're out of state, we'll also do some research and help them find kind of the equivalent community resource for them so that they have those counseling resources available. In addition to that, we will help students get connected to medical resources. And so sometimes after an incident has occurred, our students have concerns that maybe they've contracted an STI or that they could be pregnant. But the cost sometimes of seeking that help can be prohibitive, especially if students don't have medical insurance, or if they are underaged and their parents would need to know. And so we can help our students get connected to testing. And this is not something that we advertise, so I would also please ask you not to advertise this as well, but we will pay for the cost of their testing. We don't cover all the medication afterward if they do come back with a positive result of infection, but we do at least help them get that initial testing just to clear them and help to remove that, that anxiety associated with whatever's happened. And then in addition, we can get students connected with our student legal services. If you're not familiar with student legal, we've got a couple of attorneys on campus who are dedicated to working with students. Now, they can't represent UNT students against one another, but they can provide legal advising. And then they can also help with matters that might have some sort of legal standing. And so where we see this quite often is if we've got matters of custody with students who have children and are working through a custody battle, or if they're living off campus in some sort of apartment complex and in the situation of stalking or domestic violence, maybe they're trying to get out of their lease, but are having a difficult time with the landlord or with the apartment ownership. And so our legal services can step in and help them navigate those lease termination terms and help them to figure that process out. And so these are all things that we can offer to our students just as needed. But our students definitely come in at varying levels of readiness to discuss these things. And sometimes they don't know at all what it is that they need. And so we'll offer that to them. If someone comes in, we'll just let them know, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. And these are some of the things that we can help out with. Does anything connect for you? Is that something that seems like it could be relevant? And if so, then we'll help them get connected. And if they are not ready to do any of that, but they just are happy to know that we exist on campus, that's also fine. And so this is for you guys to know that these are some of the services that we offer to our students. Some other things that come to mind are proctoring exams. We do that sometimes if a student is having trouble attending class, but they still need to complete their finals or a midterm or something. I've proctored exams for students before and just have them sit in our office so that they feel safer. And so we just try to meet students where they are and provide services that are going to be as meaningful to them as possible. And really the purpose is to make tomorrow just a little bit easier than today, because I can't go back and undo anything that's happened, but hopefully the next step can be easier because you didn't have to contact your instructor, or now you've got a counselor that you're able to speak to, or your concerns for your health have been alleviated. And so really our purpose here is to be an advocate for the student and offer support and service as much as possible. What that also means is that we are not in any way involved in the investigation process. And so if a student does decide to move forward with a conduct investigation, I don't have any part in doing the investigation. I don't ever meet with the person who's been accused of misconduct. We call that the respondent. I never meet with them. It is not my job to gather all of that information because I would not be objective enough to make those kinds of decisions. And so as the survivor advocate, I'm really here to provide support, to connect people to resources, and to advocate for my students. Okay, so there are times when students have concerns about getting support from the survivor advocate because the violence happened while they were at another school or before they came to UNT. So I want you guys to know that A, the violence does not have to have occurred while the student was enrolled at UNT. And also, students don't have to move forward with a report in order to receive support and services from the survivor advocate. So those two things, I feel like it's important to mention because both of those can keep students from coming to see us or from moving forward and getting the help that they need. So if something happened before they came to UNT, but they're now a UNT student, they are eligible to receive services from us. And also, if they're not at the point where they're ready to move forward with any kind of an investigation, but they still need academic support or they still need to see a counselor, we're not ever going to force someone to move forward with a report or to pursue an investigation, because that is an intensely personal decision. Often it's emotionally loaded, you know, and there's just a lot that goes into it, and having to remember and relive so many of those things that they've been through that have been extremely painful. And so we will never be the people to force someone to make a report, and we can still provide support and services regardless. However, if someone does decide 6 months later or a year later that they are finally ready to move forward with an investigation, we would be happy to get them connected to those resources, whether it's our conduct office or the police, even the police in a different jurisdiction as needed. And so they don't have to file a report in order to receive survivor advocacy, and the incident does not have to have occurred while they were enrolled at UNT. So as UNT students, they are eligible for this service. Okay, so what I just told you guys about is kind of the day-to-day of what we do, but then our other role on campus is to do education and prevention. And so that includes trainings like what I'm doing right now. And so presentations and trainings across campus for faculty, for staff, for student organizations, and different clubs and groups. And really the purpose is to increase awareness of our office as well as the issues that are surrounding sexual assault, intimate partner violence, Title IX issues in general. Because we're definitely one of those offices that a lot of people don't know about until someone needs us. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also want people to know about us ahead of time so that they can make good referrals and just have that awareness that there is support for them on campus. And so we do trainings in addition to this, like this basic stuff. We have trainings about boundaries. We have trainings about consent and healthy relationships and bystander issues and all kinds of stuff. And so if that's something that you guys are looking at for programming this fall and you would like for us to get involved, then I would love to have an email from you, or we can have a discussion and figure out what's going to be the best for your residents and see what we can come up with. Okay, so I just mentioned a bystander intervention training. If you've been on campus lately or around campus for a little bit, you may have seen green dots, like green dot ground stickers that say, "What's your green dot?" And you may have seen those around. And so green dot is UNT's bystander intervention training. And really the premise of that training is that even though no one person can do everything to reduce violence on campus, everyone can do something and everyone is expected to do their part. It's a great training. It's really interactive. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to reimagine that to be able to offer it remotely this fall. But yeah, if you guys are looking for some way for students to be able to take ownership of their role on campus and their ability to do something, even if they don't feel comfortable getting directly involved, Green Dot is a great option. Additionally, you can invite your students to become a member, of It's On Us, which is a national student organization on college campuses that's also designed to reduce sexual assault against members of college campuses. And so you can invite your residents to take a pledge online, which is itsonus.org. And we've got t-shirts as well. And so if your students take the pledge, and we're also hoping to host some events this fall for people to take the pledge, then we can give them a t-shirt if they're on campus and wanted to come by and get one. And so those are a few things, and like everything else, we're just figuring out what fall is going to look like, and you know, how we're going to do things differently. And so we definitely welcome your creativity and ideas about how to do that. Okay, so that is the content that I have here. But then I also wanted to pause and ask you guys for questions and what we are able to do to answer your questions. And so I know I went through that pretty quickly, but I wanted to make sure that you had a good understanding. So let me pause for questions, and then we'll talk a little bit about writing good referrals. And then we'll go from there.
Awesome. So we do have one question that's in the chat. And if a executive board member of a student organization is aware of a sexual assault but fails to report, what happens?
That is an excellent question. So all of you right now who are considered staff, even though you're students, you're also staff, you're considered to be a mandated reporter or a mandatory reporter, okay? And so if they are not a staff member, then the obligations for reporting are different for them, but there's still a consequence in that, like when you know of something like this that's happened to one of your fellow students, you still need to report something. And so if they're considered a staff member, because I know that the like the staff advisor positions, the student org advisor position, some of those are voluntary. And so if they're not considered staff, then they have different reporting obligations. But if you know about it as a mandated reporter, then you do need to submit some sort of report. And so my recommendation, if you're unsure, is to contact either Eve Bell or Mo McGinnis, both of them. So Mo is the Dean of Students, and then Eve is the Title IX coordinator at UNT, just to let them know, like, hey, is this something that this person is obligated to report? I just want to be sure, because one way or the other, if you know about it and you don't let us know about it, then that could mean your job. At the beginning of the year with Title IX, it became a mandate that if someone knew about an incident and didn't report it, that is a fireable offense, but also a felony offense. And so we know you guys need your jobs, and we also know that you care about the students who are here on campus and want to be able to support them the best way that you can. And so if you come to know about something, then report it, because we'd much rather you do that and then it turns out to be nothing than for someone to really need help or be in a dangerous situation and we had no idea about it. But yeah, sometimes the requirements are different for different roles on campus. So I just want to be clear for you guys, because you're staff, you are mandatory reporters. And so if you come to know about something, you do need to report it. But for someone else, I guess I don't know enough about their position to be able to say what kind of consequences there would be. And so it's important to be able to just check in with Mo or with Eve and find out, hey, is this a person who had the responsibility of reporting? So
can I add something to that, Esther?
Yes, absolutely.
So let's say also if the student club member or whoever it is found out about something, and then they asked you, hey, so-and-so told me this, and this is what's happening, at that point, now you have to report because you were told something. So even if that person doesn't say it because it's not something in their wheelhouse of having to be a mandated reporter, from the time any one of us staff members hear anything that could be in the realm of Title IX, we are obligated to report, even if it's second, third, fourth hand information. I would say always leave it to the people who are going to do the investigations or the initial inquiries about it to come up with a decision, like Esther said, on if it will move forward into an investigation. But from the time you know anything, then you have to report just on the information that you know.
Thank you, LaToya. Okay, what other questions do you guys have?
The next one I saw is your office open to walk-ins?
Okay, so currently I'm working remotely full-time. My graduate assistant is on campus on Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 to 3:30. She's currently completing her internship at Denton County Friends of the Family, so she sees clients there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So far, the Survivor Advocate is on campus on Monday and Wednesday between 9 to 3:30. And then also Jessica Hogue is the care team coordinator, and she acts as my backup if I'm never, or if ever I'm not around. And so if you came on a Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Jessica is typically on campus and her office is in the Dean of Students suite. And so, so those would be the times where people could come in. And so, you know, we'll see as we get closer to the opening of school, what it's going to look like for us to be on campus full time. But those are the times when currently we are on campus. And so ideally, we like to have a little bit of notice before meeting with the student, just so that we can make sure we've got time to meet with them. Whenever we were in pre-COVID times, we had a lot of walk-ins, and we can definitely take them. But when we are able to schedule an appointment with someone, we can just make sure that we don't have anything else that's interfering. So ideally, we know about them, or you guys have submitted a referral. We'll make contact with the student and then set up a good time to meet with them that works with their schedule. Currently, we are a little bit open, but things definitely look different. So we prefer being able to schedule if possible, but those are the times right now when we are available to meet with someone in person presently.
The next question is, if your reporting can affect the ability to help a resident because they don't want anything to be reported, how do we navigate that?
That's a great question. And this is actually something that keeps folks from reporting sometimes because they're concerned about maybe jeopardizing their relationship with the student or with the resident. And, you know, like it took a lot for them to trust you with that disclosure in the first place. And so it makes sense that you might have concerns about making that report. And so remember that because you are a mandated reporter, you don't really have a choice. If someone makes that disclosure, you do have the obligation to report. So what I always recommend to students is that if you're having a conversation with a student and it looks like they're about to say something that's going to create the obligation for you to report, like if it looks like they're getting ready to disclose something, you can let them know ahead of time, like, hey, I know that it looks like there's something on your mind that you want to share with me, and I really want to be here for you, but I also want you to know that if you tell me this, if you tell me what I think you're going to tell me, I do have the responsibility to report it. And so if you don't want me to have to do that, then, you know, just I want you to be aware of that. And sometimes that will change the conversation, but the student feels better knowing that they had the choice. But if they make that disclosure and you didn't have a warning ahead of time, then same kind of thing. You can still let them know, okay, so I do have to report this because of my position as a mandated reporter. But the people who are going to reach out to you, this is actually something I was going to tell you guys in just a moment. When you submit a referral or when you reach out to the Survivor Advocate and make a referral online, that referral comes to me as the Survivor Advocate. It goes to the Dean of Students, it goes to the Title IX coordinator, and it goes to conduct. And so all of us have different responsibilities to reach out in different contexts. But for me, I'm only doing what I've just told you guys about. I'm only there to offer support. And also, students don't have to tell me anything, right? And so if you guys submit a referral because that's the law and that's your job, the students are not required to come in and meet with me. And if they do come in and meet with me, they don't have to tell me anything. We give them the levity to choose at what level they want to share. Sometimes I have students who come in and they just are not ready to say anything at all. And so I don't force it. I let them know that I'm there. I'll usually follow up a couple of times to remind them of our services, but they're not required to share. But it's really important too that you guys have those relationships with the students and you're able to reinforce to them that, hey, I know that what you told me was something really hard to have to share. And so I don't want to increase your vulnerability by having to report this, but because I know that there are other things that you may need, I don't want you to be going through this alone. And there's someone on campus whose specific job it is to help support you through this. And so, just let them know that it's in the context of your job, and also that you're not telling anyone who doesn't need to know. This is not something you're discussing in your next staff meeting. This is on a need to know basis only, and we protect those disclosures as much as possible. But the unfortunate thing is sometimes it is unavoidable to kind of break that relationship a little bit, because you can't promise them confidentiality, right? That's not something that you're able to do. You can keep it private, but you can't promise them that you're never going to tell. And also, much like Latoya said, if this student has told someone else and it comes up later on that you knew and you didn't submit a report about it, then that could mean your job, and that could mean a felony offense. And so it's for your protection, it's for the student's protection, and sometimes that just gets really hard. And so the advice generally is to let them know before they disclose that, because I'm a mandated reporter, if you say something to me that involves this, I will have to report it. But the people that I'm reporting to are only offering support. You don't have to tell them anything more than you want to. You don't even have to meet with them if you don't want to. I just want to make sure that someone else knows so that they can offer support to you. So I hope that's helpful. I know it's a little bit tricky, but I hope that's helpful. What other questions?
Sorry.
The next question, when you say staff, is it only the housing department that are mandatory reporters?
No, yeah. It is everyone. So anyone who's employed by UNT. So if you are employed by UNT, you are considered a mandated reporter. And so that does include student workers, and you guys are all considered student workers. It definitely includes full-time staff, graduate assistants who are working in a staff role. So it's everyone on campus who's employed by UNT.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so if there's anything else that comes up, then please let me know. The final thing that I wanted to mention is that when you guys are submitting referrals to us, what I found is that with housing, you guys do such a good job of including details, but sometimes the reports can get a bit dense, and it takes me a while to figure out what the issue is or what the allegation is. Excuse me. And so when you guys submit a report using report.unt.edu, and you've put in the information of the student and maybe of the respondent, if you know who that is, and you're giving us the details of the incident, the most important things for me to know are, what is the allegation that you're making? So is it a sexual assault? Was it sexual harassment? Was it domestic violence? I need to know what the allegation is. I need to know if the other person involved is a UNT student. And I need to know, did it happen on campus or off campus? Because if it happened on campus, then that will also change some of those reporting obligations. If it happened on campus, did you file a Clery report? And so, okay, so I see the question that came in. So you don't want us to write it like we do in IR, just making sure. So we do want you to submit the IR the way that you normally do, but the issue that I found with housing specifically is that there's so much information that it's hard to figure out like what the case is. And so if you need to give the details, what I would love first is let's say student Smith reported a sexual assault that occurred off campus, on August 21st. The respondent is not a UNT student, so no query report was necessary. Police were involved or were not involved. Like, I just need the bare bones facts. And so if there's anything else that's relevant, that there was a roommate involved or another UNT student who was involved, you can put that stuff in there. But sometimes some of the details that you guys have in there about who you called or where you went and other stuff, like, it takes a little bit of time for me to get to the actual meat of the report that lets me know what happened, who was involved, and what you guys did. Okay. And so what I'm asking for is that whenever you submit a report, make sure that if nothing else, you include who was involved, where it happened. So like on campus or off campus, if the respondent, who is the person who was involved, like the person who's been accused of misconduct, whether or not they're a student, if it did happen on campus, did you file a query report? Because if you didn't, then I will need to, and so that's fine. I just need to know if it's been done so that I don't duplicate that report. Okay. It looked like there was a follow-up question.
Yes. So what if a student resident does not divulge a lot of information, but you, as the mandatory reporter, knows that an incident has occurred?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes we have reports that really just don't have a whole lot of information. It is not your responsibility to investigate further. You don't have to push them for a bunch of information. Sometimes they'll tell you something just in passing, and they wanted you to know, or they don't make it a big deal, but you're like, oh, actually, that sounds like something that probably needs to be reported. Then you can submit a report that says, RA so-and-so, or I'm sorry, resident so-and-so disclosed A, B, and C to me. They didn't provide additional information, but as my responsibility as a mandated reporter, I'm submitting this referral or whatever. And so when we make contact with the student, then they can tell us as much or as little as they want to, but you don't have to go through and say, I don't know if it's this or this or this, but it sounds like blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't have to press them for more information. You don't have to make a big deal about it. Just, if you're submitting the report, let us know that this is all I know. I don't know anything more, but I do know that I didn't need to submit this report, and then we will take it from there. The conduct team does a really good job of asking the specific questions that they'll need answers to in order to create the investigation and write their investigative reports. And so since that is their specific job, all you guys need to do is report it, and your responsibility kind of stops there. Good question. I think there was another question. Okay, so this question says, what about reports against staff members? What does that process look like? Is it the same regardless of who it is? That's an excellent question, Hannah. So when students make a report, or actually I'll say this, reports can come in from anyone. It can come in from RAs, it can come from significant others, it can come in from parents, from siblings, from other staff members. The report.unt.edu is accessible to anyone. But if the allegation is against a staff member, then the people who do the investigation will be different, okay? So if the allegation is a UNT student against another UNT student, then that's when the conduct team does their investigation. However, if the allegation is a UNT student and also involves a staff member, whether they're full-time staff, whether they're faculty, then that is sometimes going to be a joint investigation between our conduct office and then the Office for Equal Opportunity, which is Title IX, and that's where Eve is, so that they can investigate, and they handle the sanctions differently. The sanctions are the consequences. I'd also love LaToya to pop in and say a little bit more about how those things vary.
Sorry, for some reason I couldn't unmute. So just so that some of you all know, I will talk a little bit about this after Esther's presentation, but because I have a dual role in housing and student conduct, I'm also a Title IX investigator. And so what Esther was saying is absolutely correct. When it is a staff and student situation, it will become a joint investigation between student conduct and EEO. So what happens is EEO will most likely take the lead because there are a lot of other employment aspects that is associated with it. So EEO stands for Equal Employment Opportunity Office. So they do a lot of those and discrimination stuff as well. What happens from there is student conduct will always focus on the student aspect of things. Sometimes EEO will get involved if it's two students who are also staff members of the institution, because then again, once again, that employment aspect of things are there. And so usually what will end up happening is, as an RA, the link that Esther was telling you about, that link is on the intranet. So we just still ask you, just to keep things consistent, to use the link through the intranet to help you get to the sexual misconduct reports. And that's how everything is always going to be routed to the DOS. If you, for some reason, were informed of some information that honestly could be between two staff members, whether it's full-time staff or a graduate staff member and a full-time staff member, you can always report through the sexual misconduct link that is online, or you can also do a report through EEO directly, because at that point, those are two staff members versus the two students. Graduate students, I know y'all are graduate students, but the employment piece overrides that for you. Did I answer it for you, Esther, or is there anything else you wanted to know?
I think that's good. I just needed a supplement, so that's perfect. Thank you so much.
The last question I think we have is, after an RA files a report, will there be an investigation even if the victim doesn't want an investigation?
Oh, great question. So like I had mentioned earlier, students definitely come in at varying levels of readiness to even talk about what's happened. Sometimes someone has been through something that's so traumatic that they can't even say it out loud. And so then the idea of having to participate in some sort of investigation is overwhelming. It's a little bit too much. And so, so there are a couple of different ways to answer this. Number one, like I said, I will never be the person who tells someone that they have to move forward with an investigation. However, the more information I have about the incident, the more likely it is that investigations will occur. Because especially if we're talking about something that's happened repeatedly, or this is maybe it's a UNT student who might victimize other UNT students, then it becomes less about what one student wants and more about being able to protect the greater good of the institution. And so we don't always move forward with an investigation, but if someone comes in and they tell me, hey, this thing happened with someone that I know, but they don't tell me that person's name, I don't have enough information to move forward. But if they tell me that person's name, or if your report, you provide the respondent's name and their student ID number, now we do have enough information to at least call them in, and that may begin an investigation. And so someone can choose the level at which they want to participate, and the new Title IX regulations might make it a lot more likely that our students won't want to participate in an investigation. However, I'll just say it like to boil it down. The more information I have, the more likely it is that an investigation will occur. Someone can decide that they don't want to participate, or they don't want to, to provide that information, and that's fine. And if they decide at a later time that, hey, I wasn't ready then, but I am ready now and I want to move forward with an investigation, we can still do that as well. So if someone tells you all of the information, then you do have to give it to us. And sometimes that does mean an investigation. So the less information we have, the less we can do. So that's kind of the way that it works. And so same thing, if I've got a student in my office, sometimes their concern is that, hey, I want to tell you what happened, but if I tell you, will you have to investigate? Will something happen to that person? I let them know. I can only do with the information that you give me, I can only do so much. And so if you tell me this much information, that's all I can work with. But if you give me more information, including their name, then I will have to move forward with an investigation, or at least it's more likely that it will happen. So no, it doesn't always happen, but the more information we have, the more likely it is that we will have to move forward with something. And so that could be part of the disclaimer that you give students whenever it looks like they're getting ready to make a disclosure. Hey, if you're going to tell me this, I'll have to report. Hey, if you tell me this and you tell me the other person's name, I'm going to have to include that in my report. So the less I know, then the less I'm responsible for. And so that can be your out, kind of like that can be your escape hatch. So just think about it that way. It looked like a couple more questions came in.
When police are involved, is a clery is not required, correct?
That is correct. So if UNT police, like if something happens on campus and you guys call the police and they come over, you don't have the responsibility of completing a clery report. That's correct.
And that's for all incidents that occur, not just Title IX.
The next question is, could you give some tips on supporting a survivor whose case has been dismissed?
This is one of the hardest parts of my job because I see my survivors in a different context, I think, than the other folks who are involved in the investigation process. And it is really difficult whenever I've seen someone who's just devastated by this thing that's happened, and then they go through the process and unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence to be able to prove responsibility on one side or the other. And so, I'm really open with students and saying, I hate this for you. You know, I'm so sorry. I know that this is disappointing or devastating or crushing. Like, this is really hard and it's unfair. And I know that you feel disappointed or like the system let you down. Like, it's okay to offer empathy in that way. But then the other thing that I always want to remind students is that just because they were not able to make that finding of responsibility doesn't mean that nothing happened. We're not saying that you're lying. We're not saying that you're not telling the truth or that this didn't affect you the way that you're telling us it affected you. We're just saying that unfortunately in this case where we had to find responsibility, we had to prove what happened, we weren't able to do that. And so when you're able to reassure the students that just because someone wasn't found responsible doesn't mean that nothing happened, that on its own can be helpful. But I'll be honest with you, it is really tough. It's really tough whenever you've been there supporting someone through something that was maybe the worst time of their lives, and they've gone through the process, and then the findings come back, you know, and that person who ruined my life and whatever, you know, wasn't found responsible. It's really hard to find the right words to say. And so sometimes just being there with them and letting them know, I see you, I hear you, I believe you, I'm here for you, I support you, and giving them your presence can be helpful. But unfortunately, there's no perfect answer and there's no perfect way to support someone. You can also give them options for appealing, and this is also something that I would like for LaToya to speak to, like what happens after the investigation is over, what kind of recourse students have, because I'm not an expert in that area, but sometimes students want some sort of reconsideration, or they want them to think through other options or other outcomes. And so LaToya, will you speak to that a little bit, please?
Sure. So once a student receives their decision on the Title IX case, and this is for the complainant or the respondent, and I'm using conduct terms, so I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't offend, but when a situation occurs and they receive the responses, in the letter, it provides them with opportunities to ask for a reconsideration, right? Or to ask for it to be reviewed. And one way for it to be reviewed is asking for the sanctions or the decision. And there are multiple ways for that to happen, right? So one is let's say if someone was found responsible and it was suspension or expulsion from the institution, then the respondent has the ability to ask for a review with the Student Conduct Committee. And that committee is made up of students, faculty, and staff. So they can review those sanctions that were provided, and whatever determination they make is semi-final. Another way for stuff to be reviewed is to ask it to go to the VP for Equity and Diversity. Her name is Joanne Woodard. And so Ms. Woodard will review the entire case because EEO falls underneath her. And what she'll do is she will let us know if she approves or denies exactly what is going on. And then if she makes recommendations, then we'll go back through the case and review it accordingly based on what the VP decides.
Thank you, Latoya. So I guess to also wrap that up, sometimes there's not a great solution. There's never a magic word. There's definitely not a perfect way to resolve something that feels incomplete, especially if the process took longer than someone expected or cost them more emotionally than they anticipated having to give. And then they reach the end and it feels like, well, what did I do that for? Like, was it even worth it? And so being able to hear someone and validate what they're experiencing in that moment is so important. You know, just seeing them, hearing them, and creating space for them to be angry or to be upset or to be disappointed, and not making any judgments against the way that they're expressing themselves, because that might be one of the only places where they're able to be as honest as possible about what they're feeling. But this is also a great place for you guys to make referrals, to walk them over to counseling and testing, or to help them find something to get involved in if they don't feel like talking it out, but they want to do something instead. This is where the friendship or the kind of relationship that you have with your residents can be the most important, and where you can provide support in a way that I'm not able to, right? Because you guys are going to be in contact with your residents more often and in a much closer way than I will. And so there are things that I can say and things that we can offer. Latoya can always give them their options for moving forward after the investigation, but just being as human and as vulnerable with them as possible and making it okay for them to express their disappointment and their frustration and their distress and whatever. Just you being there with them and allowing them to be as open and vulnerable with you as possible can be so much more meaningful and impactful than coming up with any perfect solutions.
Can I also add something to that, Esther?
Yes.
So one thing that I always like to talk to people about, especially us as staff members, we put so much heart, we put so much time, we put so much care into the things that we do, right? And cases like this, Title IX situations are always some of the hardest situations for anyone to deal with. But as an RA, sometimes you're put in the middle on the front lines of it, and you're being asked to help care for residents at the same time. What I want to also remind you, though, is that I'm trying to express it appropriately, is that you also have to take care of yourself in that process. And it does not mean that I am telling you to not pay attention to the resident, but I'm asking you to understand what your triggers are, to understand when you are at the point that in this moment, I cannot continue, to assist in certain ways, right? And I say this because sometimes we really want to help people out, that we start to advocate for them, that we start to take on the role because we feel like they're not doing it because it's hurting them, right? But what I also want you to remember is that it is not our role to dictate to someone else what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing, right? And I want y'all to also remember that we are advocates. Y'all are advocates to a certain extent, right? Advocacy is going to come from Esther's role. We are going to provide the support to the students. But I also want you to remember that you also have to support yourself. You also really have to understand that this is a lot. Y'all are also college students. You are also resident assistants, and you have to know when you are even going close to the limit of this is too much. And then you have to ask yourself, Am I even providing the appropriate resources to this person who was in so much pain? Because sometimes, we just want to help and we forget to say, hey, there are people who were trained to really take care of people who are going through traumatic situations. And at this point, as resident assistants, that's not what your training is. Your training is to refer, your training is to support as much as possible. But I also want you to remember that you can't forget about the care of yourself as well when you're caring for someone else.
Latoya is a queen among women. I hope you guys know the treasure that you have in her. She's amazing. Were there more questions that came up in the chat, Tressa?
There were two more.
Okay.
And I know for time-wise, we do have to go into the next session.
Sure.
I'm trying to see if we can answer them quickly or if we need to pause and kind of get those questions out, answers to you.
It's okay, because the next session is me as well.
Okay.
So I can bounce off some of this.
Okay.
Okay. So the next question is, Latoya is a gem. That's adorable. What do I do if a friend tells me their experience with sexual assault and harassment from childhood and they are not looking for a case and don't give any details? Do I report it? How do I report that if I have to? Friend being someone from campus, but it didn't happen on campus. It didn't happen.
Okay.
It was just childhood.
Great question. So you do not have the responsibility of reporting something that happened in childhood. If someone is like in conversation, they're like, yeah, I had some messed up stuff happen to me, but maybe they've since sought counseling or it's been resolved, you don't need to bring that up to me. But let's say it's a new student who says, this is some stuff that I dealt with in childhood and I've been in counseling. And so I would just like to know what resources are available to me on campus. Or if something comes up and I would like to know who to talk to, can you connect me? That's also not something that you have to report to me, but it's a good place for you guys to have your own toolkits ready for resources that are available to them on campus. The most recent situation I had with a student whose abuse happened during childhood, but I came to know about it, was because she was filing the CPS report now that she's an adult. And so there was the caseworker involved, and they came to campus in order to be able to take the report, and then she was missing some school because of court dates and stuff like that. So that would be a situation where something that happened in childhood came to my attention because the student needed academic advocacy. But outside of that, if they were just telling you, confiding in you, you don't have to break that confidence. I don't need to know about things that happen in childhood unless someone has a specific question about how it's affecting them today. So if it's a long time ago, if it was childhood abuse, you don't have the responsibility of reporting it. But if they need resources, because usually people will say something like that, to say, yeah, I'm just looking to continue my care. I want to make sure that my mental health stays on track. What can you do to support? Then definitely give them those resources. But no, you don't have to report that stuff to me. Good question.
Can I add something to that though, Esther?
Yes.
Sometimes we do have residents that are under the age of 18, and childhood could be a year beforehand.
Yes.
So if we know that those residents are under the legal age of 18 and being able to, make certain legal decisions for themselves, then we need to report that. I don't know if that's something that conduct would take care of necessarily, but that's also a way for Esther to reach out to that person to make sure, are you safe? Because it could be a situation where, let's say, what if it was a parent and the parent helped the student move in, and then, now that parent knows where the student lives and the student's trying to, extricate themselves from the parent, something like that would be important for us to know so that we can reach out to Esther and provide those resources for that person. And Esther would connect with housing to possibly get that person moved and any other resources that they may need. So I would say if the person is definitely under 18, please report that, because that's a whole different legal thing.
I'd say the only other time where there's childhood concerns for us is if there's ongoing abuse, and let's say this person is telling us my little brother or little sister is currently living with the abuser and I have concerns about them. Well, then that's where it becomes a CPS matter. And so even though that's not necessarily something you would have to report to me, you would want to make sure that you report it to the appropriate parties to ensure protection of those kiddos. So in general, let's say for students who are 18 and above, so considered adults, this is something that happened in childhood and they feel like it's resolved or they've worked through it. You guys don't have to report that to me, but there is the exception, like what LaToya just said, which is if they're underage and they weren't in decision-making capacity at the point that those things happened, you may need to make a secondary report.
Okay, so this next question is from Ashlyn Medina. I don't know if Ashlyn was specifically talking about a statement that you said, because the question is, how would you go about telling your resident that without hurting the resident? I'm not sure.
I think that might have been in regards to my comments about making sure that we take care of themselves.
She's thank you, Ashlyn, for updating. Referring to taking a step back and taking care of yourself while in the process of being an advocate for a resident. So I think, LaToya, I think you were correct. Thank you, Ashlyn, for clarifying.
Do you want to take it, Esther? Or you
Go for it. I'll jump in if I need to.
So I would tell you, you know, like all of you, I've done my strengths, and one of my top 5 is empathy, right? And also individualization. And when I'm very relationship building kind of person, but the other part of me is a big proponent of we can't take care of other people if we can't take care of ourselves, right? Even though we are concerned about hurting a resident's feelings, the conversation could go a little bit of something like this. You find out, you know, and your resident has been coming back and forth to you. What I would say is make sure, hey, have you gone to see a counselor? Have you gone to see Esther? And if if the resident says, yes, but the counseling center, I really don't like them, have you gone and talked to Denton County Family and Friends? I heard really great things about them. Their specific focus is trauma-oriented counseling, which is a lot of what survivors of sexual assault, the type of counseling that they really need. If they say no, then that's a really great resource to refer them off to. And in the conversation, you can honestly say, listen, I want to support you as much as possible. If I find out any other resources for you, I will let you know. But I'm just concerned because, you know, what you're telling me is really heavy and I'm not experienced enough to help you the way that you need to be assisted. So let me even follow up with my supervisor, LaToya, Esther, to see what other resources I can get for you so that you really have the help that you need. Because in this moment, you know, you don't, what I would say as an RA, don't make it about yourself in that conversation, but you can say in this moment, I don't know if I have the ability to really give you what you need. But I know that we have other people that can help you with the resources that we're looking for. So let me work on it from that end, you know, and you can talk to them about like, what do you think your biggest need is? Like, how can I help you the most? And sometimes they might say, well, I just need to talk about it and I'm comfortable talking to you. But then your response could be, but I'm honestly don't know if I'm the right person who can give you the type of assistance that you need. And I don't know if we have a lot of counselors who plan on going to graduate school for counseling here as RAs. I know for us, because I have my master's in social work, right? So that's always really hard for me sometimes to pull away from wanting to have those conversations and really help. And I have, you know, experience in the advocacy part, but I also have to understand that in this moment, that part is not what my job is, and I am doing a disservice to people if I am not able to provide them what they need in that moment.
I love what Latoya said. Yeah, no, that's super helpful, at least to me. But I think it comes down to knowing what your boundaries are and establishing good boundaries for yourself, because as RAs, you're already juggling so many responsibilities. And of course, you know, you've got your academics as well. And so you don't have to be all things to all people. And knowing that there are other people whose full-time job it is to do some of these things should give you a sense of relief in knowing that you can hand that person off and that they can be in good hands. And so if you recognize that that student or that resident is coming to depend on you in a way that is costing you quite a bit in the relationship, or is creating this unequal power balance as well, where if you're not there, then they can't cope. Like, that's not healthy for either of you. And so I love what Latoya said about saying, and just being really honest about saying, I don't know if I'm the best person right here. I think I have a little bit of a blind spot because of the way our relationship is. And I just want to make sure that you're getting the highest quality care from someone who's not me, someone who's more objective and can give you different options and give you the support that you need. Let me help you find that person or those people so that we can continue to do what we do the best. But I want to also honor your disclosure and let you know I'm so thankful to you for trusting me with this big, huge thing that's been so painful to you. It means a lot to me that you would give me that place in your life, you know? And so honor their disclosure and still make it okay for you guys to have the relationship you had before without taking on everything that they're giving to you, because that's, just to be frank, it's not your job. Like, that's not your job. You can start there, you know, but make sure that you're giving it to the people who are the most qualified to be able to offer that support. I know that I'm cutting into your next presentation, and so if there are any follow-up questions, Sarah, Jessa, Latoya, everyone has my contact information. I'm really excited for you guys to be here, and I hope that this has been informational and helpful and beneficial to you. We're here to help, and so if there's anything that I can do to assist, I really want to know. But I thank you for your engagement and your attention today. I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm excited, especially if you're first-time RAs. This is going to be great. For returners, you know, God be with you. I know it's going to be a crazy fall, but we're excited. And I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Latoya, we're going right into yours.
Okay, do we need a 5-minute break, people? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Do not leave.
Do not exit out of it. We'll come back at 2:57. And in the break, if you have questions, upload them to the chat, and I'll talk about them while I'm going through the session. All right.
So just turn off your video.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys.
I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I got about 15 minutes and I don't have a presentation because I wanted to make this more of a conversation and just going over some stuff with you all. So some of the things I actually already hit with Esther in our conversation. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. Just to give you an outline and more like specific Res Life stuff, when we do, like I said before, when we use the links in the intranet, the reason why I'm very specific about the links that you use, especially when it comes to care and Title IX stuff, is because those two links go directly to the people that need to get them. So Title IX will go to Esther and all the other people that she said, and any care related stuff, which is particularly mental health, anything like that, will go directly to the case manager, Jessica Hogue, in DOS. Like I said before, I'm a Title IX investigator here for the institution. So that means Esther handles, you know, the advocacy side, and I do the side of investigating or decision-making, depending on where that falls. Your role as an RA is very important. And I talked a little bit about this already, right? That you are an advocate to an extent, but more of the support role. What I ask is that one thing I talk about, and particularly with people when I talk about Title IX and how we respond to things, is that it's really important to know what our triggers are as people, right? Because some of us may have had friends, family members, ourselves, whoever could be really close to us that might have dealt with a Title IX situation personally, right? Whether it's here or somewhere else, we've all had certain experiences, and sometimes our experiences really do change or color how we respond to things, right? So for some people who may have had traumatic incidents with Title IX situations previously, sometimes what they may do is be really involved to make sure that the survivor is doing everything that he or she needs to do to get the assistance that they need, right? And sometimes when we do those things, we override the wants and the needs of the person in that moment. Because in that moment, we've dealt with something before, and maybe something didn't happen the way that we wanted it to happen. So now we're trying to make sure that never happens to this person. And in that, we're losing, right? We're losing what the needs of the person is. Or sometimes we could be so triggered by anything Title IX related that it is hard for us to help our residents out in that moment. Know what your triggers are, but also understand that if something is happening and you are on call, you have to handle the situation accordingly, right? And if you do need assistance, what I always tell anybody is that you are not on call by yourself. So if you know this is really something that will heavily impact you, handle the situation that's occurring and make sure then that you're calling up to the CD. If you know that I have about so much time left and where I can handle this without it really impacting me as a person, then maybe it's time to pull in the CD on call to help you out. But as a staff member, once you get this information and once you're helping someone, even if it is an emotional trigger for you, in that moment, we have to do what we have to do to at least start the process of taking care of whoever's involved. Does that make sense? And I know sometimes that's really hard for a lot of us, but we also want to make sure that we are providing the care and the need and helping people in their needs as possible. There has been some changes regarding regulations that that Esther mentioned. The good part is it doesn't necessarily impact you as the RA. Other part is some of the regulations changes that occurred comes from Betsy DeVos's administration, and some of it includes how Title IX is processed on campuses. So what that means is that sometimes instead of an investigation between the investigator and the the person directly, it may have to turn into a hearing where the respondent and the complainant will get a chance to ask questions of each other. And so what any of us will know and understand is that that alone can be very traumatic for someone who is a survivor of sexual assault in that moment, right? The idea behind it is to provide the respondent the chance to specifically, ask questions if they particularly feel like the situation wasn't clear, or that just to get additional information from the person who it's happening to. But with that comes other things that happens. And so I just want to let you all know that the university and Robinson universities across the country are really trying to work on how can we handle those hearings and those situations accordingly for everyone involved to have the most equitable process available. And what that does means is that you may get residents coming to you in tears, just concerned about the process. And so what I will say again is listen, provide as much support as you can, but also know when for you, it's It's your limit. It's your boundary. Okay. And again, I know that's always hard to say, and I hope I don't sound insensitive, but you are important too, and I don't want you to lose that from yourself. We do have, for Title IX situations, if someone is the respondent, like how Esther does the victim advocacy. We met with Renee McNamara earlier this morning, this Associate Dean of Students. One of her responsibilities is also heading up a respondent network. And so we have a few staff members, I think maybe even faculty, who are available to be supports for the respondents as well. So if anything happens, if they have questions or concerns, the respondent has a specific person that will also help advocate for them. So I just wanted to give you that information as well. If you have anybody that ever comes to you and feels like no one's listening to them, make sure that they know that they ask the question of, do you know who your respondent advocate is? I've had a couple of questions about this, and I know that Marisol and Ashley touched a little bit on this earlier today in their IR writing presentation, and that is about sexual misconduct emails, IRs going back to your emails. So I just wanted to tell everyone again to make that clear. I'm asking that after 3 days, you delete those emails from your email thing. And the reason for that is because those emails are very personal. You provided a lot of information, and I don't want certain things like that being kept in your inboxes. This is only for Title IX, stalking, anything sexual misconduct related needs to be removed. So you just hit delete and that's it. There's a question. If the resident prefers to speak to our supervisor about the incident, should we still write a report? Yes, because your report is just going to be what you were told. So if you know that it's Title IX related, just say, resident Sarah Rogers came to me saying that she was sexually assaulted but was uncomfortable speaking to me about it. My supervisor was notified and my supervisor spoke to her, and that's it. Because that's all you know. Yes, Marisol said, remember to write the IR in third person always. And one last thing, because we got like 5 minutes. So one thing that Esther also brought up was privacy versus confidentiality. And I want to also remind you on that as well, right? The reason why you are a mandated reporter and the reason why you all represent privacy versus confidentiality is because you are a mandated reporter. The only people on this campus who are considered confidential are the people who work in the health center and the counseling center. Anything to do like that are confidential, right? But because we focus on the importance of privacy, when a situation occurs, one thing that we always say, especially in training, is don't forget to go up versus going out, right? And so that is what that privacy aspect is. When you learn of a Title IX situation and you're calling the CDOC, again, you do not have to provide names because the names of the people that are involved are going to be in the incident report, right? But the CDOC needs to know something happened. If police were called, you called the police, and this is everything that you're taking care of from that standpoint, because that is the privacy of it, right? You're letting the person above you know what occurred. We are not confidential. Even I am not confidential. It's counselors, doctors. I think the lawyers on campus will also be considered confidential. So if And I think that is really something important for you to remember, which is why we always tell you to be upfront with your residents when they come to you about particularly something as private as a sexual assault that could have occurred to them. So please just remember that. If you all have any questions about that, about anything going on, just please put it in the chat. Y'all have my email. I'm the person that reads all of the IRs that come through housing, minus sexual assault and care. So if you have any questions, let me know. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are the bomb. Holla. Look at that, 3:11, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, if I could count.
You got some clapping going on. All right, so I'm gonna end the recording. Give me 1 second.